Hey guys, welcome to the 6th part of What If Deku Could Use 100% One for All from the start. Last time we left off after the events of the Two Heroes movie, where Deku and All Might teamed up to save the island and beat Wolfram. With everyone caught up, let's begin. With the first semester at UA High officially concluded, the students board the buses to go to the summer training camp. While traveling there, they suddenly stop at a cliff overlooking a forest, where they meet the wild pussycats who will be helping throughout the week to overlook their training. After the introductions are over, Mandalay points the class in the direction of the forest lodge, pointing at the base of the mountainside, and telling the students they will have to hurry and get there by noon if they are to receive lunch. The students try to rush back onto the bus to avoid this harsh training, but Pixabob uses her quirk to spill them over the mountainside and into the beast's forest. Pixabob then uses her quirk to create monsters made from the earth that the students mistake for real animals. One immediately tries to attack Minoru Minter, but Deku jumps in to save him, crumbling the rock monster with a single punch. The class then work together to navigate through the forest, destroying countless obstacles in their way, arriving at the camp before the allotted time. When they arrive, Deku questions the wild pussycats who the child accompanying them is. Mandalay then explains that his name is Kota and he is her nephew. Deku tries to introduce himself, but Kota hits him with a low blow and walks away. Seeing this, Bakugo smiles, stating he likes his spunk, and Shoto compares them to each other, causing Bakugo to retaliate. But Aizawa interrupts and tells the students to get their things off the bus and that they will all receive dinner afterward. At the aforementioned dinner service, Kirishima and Denki overzealously enjoys the wide variety of food. Denki says it's just as good as the food by lunch rush. Pixabob then explains that this is the only time the students will be well fed during the training, so they need to enjoy it. Following dinner, the students go to the hot springs. In the hot springs, Minter tries to scale the wall between the girls and the boys' bath, but Kota stops him. The girls thank Kota, and he turns around and accidentally sees them all naked. Shocked, Kota faints and falls over the wall himself. Seeing this, Deku instantly jumps into action, catching him, taking him to Mendeley, who explains Kota's family and why he disapproves of heroes despite being so young. The next day, Aizawa explains to his students that their real training will begin now. He then has Deku throw the ball similar to the Quirk apprehension test at the start of the year, with Deku using a combination of Black Whip and 100% One for All to once again launch the ball into orbit. Aizawa then face palms, stating that it was a great throw, however a horrible demonstration for what he is after, passing a ball to Bakugo, telling him to give it a shot. To everyone's surprise, Bakugo only throws the ball 8 meters further than he did at the beginning of the semester. Aizawa then says that while the students' mental prowess and stamina have improved, their quirks have not. Then telling them that the training camp will push the students in order to greatly increase the strength of their quirks. On the morning of day 2 of the training camp, Class 1B meets up in the forest. Vlad King tells his homeroom class that they will be training to enhance their quirks' capabilities. Class 1 was in the spotlight the first semester, so Vlad King wants his students to step it up so they'll have their turn. The students want to know how specifically they will be training since they all have different quirks. Vlad King explains that all quirks need to be exercised in order to improve and the students need to go beyond their limits. They then join Class 1A, who've already begun training with their quirks. Every student works on improving their quirks differently with a different exercise, pushing themselves past their limits constantly. Itsuka questions how the teachers plan on maintaining 40 students using their powers all at once. The full version of the wild pussycats introduces themselves and explains how their quirks working together can keep an eye on everyone. Tiger asks that all strength-type quirks train at his boot camp. He had already begun training Deku, however he still hadn't managed to push Deku one bit, instead getting flung into a tree by a 20% Manchester smash from Deku. Noticing he wasn't gaining anything from the training, Deku decides to train Black Whip instead, training his ability to control the shape of the quirk and the origin point on his body, increasing the amount of techniques he is capable of. During the evening after preparing curry, Deku notices that Kota wasn't nearby. Deku decides to grab a plate and locate the boy, finding him at his secret base. Kota immediately tells Deku to leave, and that it's stupid to improve his quirk just so he can show it off. Deku then asks if Kota's parents were the late hero's water hose, which angers Kota, who says he doesn't understand why crazy people call themselves heroes or villains just to kill each other. Deku then realizes that Kota's issue isn't just with heroes, it's with quirks and superhero society in general. Deku then tries to reach Kota with a story about his quirkless friend to give a different perspective, but the still angry Kota refutes Deku's help until he finally leaves. During the night of the third day of the training camp, while the students were participating in a test of courage, they start to notice blue flames and suddenly the forest is filled with a purple gas which knocks a few students unconscious. They quickly realize it is a villain attack, and jump into action, however they are ordered to retreat back to the main building of the camp. Despite having clear orders, Deku tells Mendeley he knows where Kota is, and rushes off to go protect him. At Kota's secret hiding spot, a tall muscular-built man in a mask stands over Kota, paralyzing him in fear. The villain then removes his cloak and mask, revealing his face. Kota instantly recognizes the villain as Muscular, the man responsible for killing his parents. Just as Muscular goes to crush Kota, Deku swoops in and saves him, breaking his phone in the chaos, meaning he can't call for backup if needed. Deku then promises Kota that he will defeat Muscular and protect him, standing in front of Kota, getting into a fighting stance. Muscular then recognizes Deku as one of the students on Shigaraki's kill list. Muscular then smiles, stating he will happily kill him, however not before tormenting him, activating a fraction of his muscle augmentation quirk, leaping towards Deku and Kota, punching the ground, creating a massive crater and dust cloud. However before it could land, Deku grabbed Kota, using Black Whip to hold him on his back, jumping out the way. Deku then wraps Black Whip around Muscular, slamming him into the mountainside. Impressed, Muscular gets back up, wiping some blood off his face, stating that he underestimated him, activating his full strength, tearing a boulder out from the cliff face, tossing it at Deku. But Deku punches it, shattering it. Muscular then leaps towards Deku, frowning a flurry of vicious punches at Deku, however Deku easily evades all of them, asking the villain why they are attacking them. Muscular then tells Deku that he doesn't care why Shigaraki wants to attack them, all he wants to do is to live life to its fullest, and fight strong people. Muscular then asks where Bakugo is, telling Deku to stop playing around and to fight him properly, concentrating all his muscle fibers in his arm to throw a massive punch towards Deku, which Deku blocks. Deku then tells Muscular that he will show him his full power, jumping towards Muscular, landing a 100% Detroit smash onto Muscular's chest, which breaks through his muscle fibers, incapacitating him, sending him flying through the mountain, semi-burying him. Taken back by Deku's actions, Kota recalls Mendeley's words again. He begins to cry as he realizes that Izuku is the person Mendeley knew Kota would meet. She said he would meet a person would save a life through sacrifice and become a hero. Kota says that Izuku is a hero, my hero. After defeating Muscular, Deku still has more work to do, fearing that Bakugo is the target of the attack due to Muscular's question. Deku once again picks up Kota, running through the forest at breaking speeds, swinging from tree to tree with Black Whip, eventually meeting up with Eraserhead, telling him that Bakugo is the target of the attack, handing him Kota, preparing to leave again. However just before he could leave, Aizawa gives Deku a secret order, to which Deku agrees to, once again running through the forest, until he reaches a clearing. Smashing through Spinner's giant blade weapon, wrapping Black Whip around both Spinner and Sister Magni, slamming them together, knocking them out. He then tells Mendeley to relay Aizawa's message, giving the students permission to use their quirks to defend themselves, also informing everyone that Kei-chan is the main target of the attack. While searching the forest for Bakugo, Deku is attacked by Dark Shadow Ragnarok, however just before the flying fist could slam into him, Deku manages to catch it, pushing Dark Shadow back, apologizing before punching the giant sentient quirk in the head, knocking it out, allowing Tokoyami to regain control due to its weakened state. Tokoyami and Mezo Shuji then agree to join Deku in his search for Bakugo, being pulled by Deku through the forest, until they join up with Bakugo and Shoto, seeing a giant tooth blade quirk belonging to Moonfish, attacking them. Deku then uses a 100% Texas smash to shatter the metallic blade teeth, knocking Moonfish to the ground, where he is exploded and frozen by Bakugo and Shoto. Deku then tells the group that they need to protect Bakugo and get him back to camp. Bakugo gets angry and tells them he doesn't need protection, but he is blatantly ignored as they proceed to walk back towards camp as a group, so he reluctantly follows. While on their way back to the camp, they come across Toga attacking Zuyu and Uraraka. However upon the group's arrival, Toga retreats, after falling in love with Deku, wishing he was coated in blood. Deku then asks the girls to join the Bakugo protection group. However Bakugo and Tokoyami have completely disappeared. Unlike usual, Mr. Compress doesn't introduce himself, and instead, heads straight back to the meeting point. Because of this, By the time Deku locates him, it is too late, and Kurogiri had already opened a portal for them to escape from. Seeing this, Deku slingshots himself towards Mr. Compress, punching him in the chest, making him release the marbles. However, they go in separate directions. So Deku runs to catch the one on the left, while using Black Whip to grab the other. However, Kurogiri makes a portal, stealing the marble on the right, allowing the villains to escape with Bakugo. Shortly after, the marble Deku caught releases to Koyami. The rest of the group arrive a few minutes later, to find Deku on the ground screaming and crying in frustration because of his failure to save Bakugo. Following the assault on the training camp, Vlad King called in emergency services to put out the forest fires. 15 students were knocked unconscious because of Mustard's poison gas, 10 others received unrelated injuries, 13 were physically unharmed and 1 was kidnapped. Pixabob was in serious condition and Ragdoll was missing. Muscular, Moonfish, and Mustard were all arrested by the police. The next day, media hordes crowd UA High's entrance and demand a statement. Nezu, Midnight, Present Mick, Snipe, and All Might meet to discuss the attack. Nezu claims that U.S. name is being slandered by the media. Katsuki was targeted because of his violent tendencies, and if he were to join the villains, then U.S. reputation would be crushed. Present Mick states that UA High likely has a traitor, but Snipe and Midnight shoot him down because they don't want to destroy trust between faculty. All Might receives a phone call and interrupts the meeting. He takes a call from Detective Zukoki, who reveals they've located the League of Villains hideout. The villains restrain Bakugo and enjoy all the negative publicity UA receives on television. Most of Class 1O, save for Kyoka, Toru and Momo, who were injured, meet up after being released from the hospital. Deku reflects on his failure to save Katsuki and cries. Kirishima and Shoto suggest they still try and save Hai, revealing that the previous day, they both overheard Momo talking to All Might about the tracking device she put on Nomu. Tenya Ida argues that they need to allow the pro-heroes to handle the situation. He and Kirishima argue, and the latter reaches out to Izuku for approval. Shoto explains that they need to rescue Bakugo soon because they don't know how long the villains will keep him alive. Yuga, Fumikage, and Zuyu agree that the pro-heroes should take on the job of rescuing Bakugo. The students enter an awkward silence that's only broken by Kirishima whispering to Deku, telling him to meet them behind the hospital after dark if he wants to help. Shoto and Kirishima ask Momo to make a new receiver for the tracking device she had Yozutsu place on a Nomu. She along with Deku both meet them behind the hospital after dark. However, Tenya Ida also unexpectedly arrives, lamenting about how Shoto and Deku are making the same mistakes he did in Hoju City. Tenya believes their thoughtless actions will further damage UA's reputation. Deku tries to convince him and ends up getting punched in the face by his friend. Tenya explains that he's worried about all his peers and not just Katsuki, stating that the injuries inflicted on everyone at the camp reminded him of his brother Tensei's injuries and they could get hurt even worse trying to save Bakugo. Shoto responds by telling Tenya they plan to rescue Bakugo covertly rather than confronting the villains directly. Momo decides to join them as well. Deku then explains that as long as Bakugo is within reach, he can't help but try to save his friend. Tenya decides to join them and apologizes for hitting Deku. Momo asks why Tenya had a sudden change of heart. Tenya explains that he's only there to prevent physical combat from breaking out. Momo agrees that she will share this role and is compromising because she understands the boys' feelings. She ponders their impractical plan and believes they will pull out after seeing how difficult rescuing Katsuki will be. They all board a bullet train to Kamino Ward. While on the train, Deku asks about where the rest of Class 1 stands, with Kirishima then explaining that everyone including Uraraka tried to talk them out of it. Even so, Deku decides he won't turn back. When they arrive at Kamino Ward, Momo suggests that they disguise themselves first before attacking the villains, buying clothes from a nearby shop. Afterward, they notice a crowd forming around a broadcast of a press meeting featuring UA High. Aizawa, Nezu, and Vlad King represent UA and publicly apologize for allowing students to come to harm. The media asks them questions and Deku surmises that they just want to make the school look bad. The crowd starts to badmouth the school and Deku notices that people are turning against the high school. Momo leads Kirishima, Tenya, Shoto, and Deku to what they believe to be the villains' hideout. None of them have effective stealth skills, so they ponder their next move. Deku starts to mutter and Tenya thinks about how he needs to keep the group out of trouble. They decide to go around the back and use Kirishima's night vision goggles to see through a window. Deku and Kirishima scout the building and are frightened when they discover it's a factory for breeding no Mew. Back at the League of Villains hideout, Tamura Shigaraki decides to have Kurogiri and Mr. Compress restrain Bakugo once again after he attacked him. They're interrupted by what at first seems to be a pizza delivery. Then suddenly All Might breaks through the opposite wall with a smash attack. Kurogiri tries to open a warp gate, but Kamui Wood swoops in and restrains all the villains at once. Dabi tries to burn the restraints, but Gran Torino swoops in and knocks him out with a swift kick to the head. Edgeshot enters the room by slipping through the door and reveals the entire hideout is surrounded by the police. Endeavor angrily asks why Edgeshot gets to fight while he remains outside with the police. Naomasa explains that Endeavor will catch anyone if they manage to escape the building. Shigaraki orders Kurogiri to warp over all the no Mew. Little does he know that at the same time, Mount Lady breaks open the no Mew factory. Best Jeanist and Gang Orca restrain all the no Mew, making it so Kurogiri can't transfer them. All Might tells the villains they've lost and Edgeshot knocks out Kurogiri with his quirk. Gran Torino warns the villains not to underestimate the heroes and reveals most of the villains' true identities. The old man asks Tamura where All for One is, prompting him to recall when his master first found him. Mysterious portals suddenly open and transfer several no Mew through them. Edgeshot confirms this isn't Kurogiri's doing and then Bakugo gets swallowed up in one. Kamui Woods pleads for Endeavor's help, but he and the police are dealing with no Mew that have been transported to them as well. Naomasa tries to contact Best Jeanist, but there's no response due to All for One already taking care of the heroes at the no Mew factory. All for One manages to transport all the members of the League of Villains out of the hideout. Kamui Woods apologizes for allowing them to escape. Edgeshot says that there was nothing that could be done because this warping quirk targeted certain individuals. All Might uses Oklahoma Smash to repel the remaining no Mew inside, while Endeavor incinerates the ones outside. Endeavor confirms he's got the situation under control and tells All Might to go after the League of Villains. Deku, Shoto, Momo, and Tenya are stricken with fear while hiding behind a wall, with Deku recognizing the man in the suit who just took down all the heroes as All for One. After noticing Bakugo, Deku attempts to rescue him, but Ida stops him, grabbing onto his arm. However, Deku breaks free, grabbing Bakugo with Black Whip, throwing him into the air, away from the battlefield, attempting to punch All for One of God. However, the ancient villain catches the punch along with Deku's follow-up punch, holding him back, stating that he must be All Might's precious successor. All for One then activates air cannon in his arms, launching Deku away, who only barely manages to catch himself with Black Whip before colliding with a wall. Before All for One could notice the other students and continue his attack on Deku, All Might arrives and confronts him. While All Might fights All for One, Deku takes out the League, forcing All for One to use forced quirk activation on Kurogiri and Magn, managing to warp the villains away. All Might then states that he is done holding back, however All for One continues to hold All Might's attacks back. By warping Gran Torino in front of it and using shock inversion to reflect the damage back onto All Might, damaging him. All Might recovers and grabs Gran Torino before he unleashes a Detroit Smash to counter All for One's spring-like limbs and air cannon quirk. All for One points out that All Might is still holding back because of the bystanders nearby. All Might angrily declares that he will not let All for One's disrespect of the common man continue and crushes his helmet with a powerful strike. However, All for One survives the attack. All Might begins to partially revert to his weak form and All for One says All Might's declaration is similar to his predecessors, Nana Shimura. Meanwhile, Deku would use Black Whip and his speed to quickly rescue civilians trapped under rubble or near to the battlefield. However, upon realizing All Might was at his limits and All for One was preparing to attack him, Deku would jump in the way, pushing All Might to the side, getting flung into the air instead of All Might. Deku would then realize he was on a trajectory towards a news helicopter, so desperately tried to stop himself, however couldn't use his air pressure attacks or else it would damage the helicopter. Just before he hit it, Deku would stop mid-air, unlocking the quirk of the 7th user of One for All float. Gran Torino reminds All Might that All for One's taunting is what distracted All Might the last time they fought. At the same time, across the globe, citizens and heroes among others watch the horrifying broadcast of All Might's bout, pleading for All Might to come out victorious. All for One charges up another attack. Gran Torino orders All Might to evade, but the villain aims for a nearby civilian trapped underneath debris. All Might defends the civilian by taking the brunt of All for One's air cannon, while Deku uses Black Whip to evacuate the citizen and search for others trapped in the debris. Having tanked the previous attack, All Might's body reverts completely back to its weak form, revealing this body to the public for the first time. All for One then claims that he'll destroy All Might's reputation by exposing his weakness, but All Might replies that in spite of his body's weakness, he remains the symbol of peace within his heart. In an effort to break All Might's will, All for One reveals that Tamura Shigaraki is actually Nana Shimura's grandson. All Might struggles to believe it, and All for One taunts him about smiling all the time. All Might thinks back to when Nana taught him that the strongest people are always smiling, but he begins to break down after thinking about if Nana could see Tamura's evil. All Might begins to despair. Deku encourages him to continue fighting and to win. With his confidence restored, All Might charges One for All into his arm and tells his nemesis that heroes have too much to protect and that's why he won't lose. All Might thinks back again to some of his master's advice, as she tells him to remember his origin, and by doing so he can go beyond his limits. Gran Torino watches from a distance and worries that enduring so many of All for One's powerful attacks has taken too much of a toll on All Might's body and his quirk. All for One levitates above All Might and prepares to blast him, but Deku counters it with a punch of his own. All for One is impressed that the young hero in training had already gained such proficiency with the quirk despite only having it for a few months at best. Deku then encourages All Might to win because no matter his appearance, All Might is still everyone's #1 hero. All for One then charges up the ultimate combination of all his quirks to create a powerful arm he plans to crush All Might with. Taunting him about resisting despite only having the embers of a quirk left and not having any control over his successor. All for One attacks and Deku matches him, wrapping himself and All for One with Black Whip, to prevent his escape. All for One then activates Impact Recoil to start to push Deku back, damaging his arm. However, Deku continues to hold All for One in place, using his anger to strengthen Black Whip's grip on him. Yelling for All Might to finish him once and for all. All Might then uses the last embers of One for All inside him to enhance his arm, using a double United States of Smash alongside Deku to knock out the symbol of fear, winning the battle. Both raising their arms in victory. All Might bids farewell to One for All and enters his muscular form one last time. Edgeshot says All Might shouldn't push himself, but Gran Torino explains that his job isn't over. As the symbol of peace and justice, All Might must reaffirm the faith in heroes for the common people. Afterward, heroes arrive and conduct rescue operations. All for One is arrested and All Might points to Deku and the camera and delivers one last message. He says that it's your turn next. The average person believes this is a warning to criminals. However, Deku knows that All Might can't use One for All anymore and his legacy is left to his protege, starting to cry. Okay guys, this is the end of the 6th part of What If Deku Could Use 100% One for All from the start. If you enjoyed this What If, please consider dropping a comment, like, subscribing to the channel and turning on the notification bell to be notified about all What Ifs I upload. With this out the way, this is Demonic Saiyan saying bye.